Hello, welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Muradyan. He's an investment advisor with Capital Investments in Yerevan, Armenia. Welcome to CivilNet, Gary. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us today. We are going to be discussing last week, the government of Armenia issued Eurobonds. It debuted on international markets, and the government was able to raise $700 million. Can you please explain to us why the government of Armenia at this juncture decided to issue Eurobonds?
I think as many sovereigns around the world, it basically had to do with a favorable market environment currently. As you know, because of very loose monetary policy around the world, particularly in the United States, the interest rates are very low. So that means issuing debt is very cheap. And I think Armenia decided to take advantage of that and make its issue of Eurobonds and raise financing at very favorable terms.
6%.
6%, exactly.
If you could explain to us why Armenian Eurobonds, the rate is at 6% and it matures in 7 years. So the Armenian government has to pay back the 700 million over a 7-year period, or at the conclusion?
Well, basically they pay a coupon on semi-annual basis. The 6% is the annual rate, and at maturity, which will be in September, at the end of September 2020, they will pay the principal amount.
Okay, before we get to 2020, what does this mean for Armenian financial markets? What does this mean for Armenian industry, for citizens, businesses, big businesses, I would presume?
I think in general it's a positive step because it's, as you know, recently Moody's downgraded Armenia's credit rating, and one of the primary reasons that was cited was Armenia's closure of finance and trade to outside world. So this sort of opens up Armenia to international investment community. And I think in that respect, it's a positive because Armenia can benefit from global financial markets.
Could you give me an example of Armenian companies that have the capability and capacity to enter those international financial markets today? Do we have that kind of business environment in Armenia today?
I think mostly the large capitalization companies, which are very few today in Armenia, if they have projects, they can certainly seek financing in international markets. But if they need to raise financing, now it would be easier for them to secure better rates in international markets because of these Eurobonds, which serve as benchmark for private issuers of the country.
Okay, and the rate of sale, I mean, it was very quick that they were able to sell $700 million. Is that normal? Is that how it's usually done? I mean, why would somebody, an investment broker sitting in New York, who works with JP Morgan or Deutsche Bank or HSBC, who were responsible for these, why would they want to buy government of Armenia Eurobonds? Is there not a risk? Taking into consideration that Armenia is an emerging market, we're developing democracy, we don't have a lot of industry.
You have a good point there, and the rates, like I said, it's beneficial for Armenia to issue because of the cheaper rates, but at the same time, international investors are currently hungry for yield because their general investments that they're used to yield so low that they're really going out to emerging market assets to...
Even though they might be risky.
Even though they might be risking, there's a lot of cash on the side, and they don't want to sit around and wait. They want to make money, and so.
There's been a lot of discussion around these Eurobonds in Armenia, and some are saying that the reason why the Armenian government, aside from the factors that you pointed out earlier, decided to take this step is because in 2009, when Armenia received a $500 million loan from Russia, it is now, the time has come for Armenia to start paying back. There's deficit in the budget, it's strapped for cash. Is this not going to increase Armenia's debt burden in the future?
Obviously, it will increase the debt burden, but I think if you want to talk about the increasing debt issue, it's probably best to look at what causes really the budget deficit and the government spending and taxation policies. I think that's where you really can address those issues. Eurobonds is just one place where government can seek financing. As you know, Armenian government utilizes a multilateral policy in terms of financing its debt. So it can go to other creditors for debt. So it really wouldn't necessarily address the debt issue in that respect.
But is this also not a problem of, I don't want to say lack of, but a result of our economic policy in the country, where we foresee a certain percentage of economic growth, and then there's shortfalls, and because based on that economic growth, they determine the budget, and now they have spending that they need to do. So is this not a policy, is this not a problem perhaps of poor planning or not understanding Armenia's market, the regional market, and the international market that Armenia is now faced, is having to...
Yes, I think at this point, it's the debt position of Armenian government is manageable. It's usually around 45% of GDP.
For most countries, or that's what it is for Armenia?
No, that's what it is for Armenia.
But for me, that sounds very high. 45% of GDP is foreign debt. What happens in 2020 when Armenia cannot, if Armenia cannot pay back those Eurobonds?
Well, I hope the situation doesn't come down to that, but I can't really say much what will happen 7 years from now, because it depends on many factors of what could happen between now and then. I mean, hopefully Armenia's rating will improve by then, and Armenia can refinance that debt at even better rates down the road. So it's really difficult to speculate at this point what can happen.
Well, with the markets, I'm sure it's very difficult to speculate, but in 2020, if Armenia can, then it will, because what I read that we have up to the capacity of up to $3 billion that we could issue. So technically in 2020, if Armenia cannot pay back the bonds, then the government could reissue new bonds to pay off this year's debt.
I think it will be difficult. If the government is in a default situation, it will be difficult to refinance that bond issue, because obviously investors don't want to invest in a country that cannot meet its financial obligations. But I don't think it will come down to that. If the government continues its debt management policy and keeps the debt close to 40-45% of GDP, I think with the current rate of growth, it should be able to meet its obligations into the future and not impact economic growth.
Just two final questions. If you know, it's interesting, you know, we need to compare Armenia to countries in similar conditions. We don't want to compare Armenia to Germany, obviously.
Yes.
Regionally speaking, if we look at Georgia or Azerbaijan or even Turkey, if our foreign debt is 45% of GDP, what's the ratio in those countries? Do you know?
I think, for example, in Georgia, the ratio is a little bit lower, around 35%. But overall in the region, Ukraine, etc., it runs about in that neighborhood. But I think that that ratio is not the only factor here. For example, the rates for Ukrainian debt or Belarusian debt are higher than what Armenia was able to secure in the bond markets, which means that international investment community deems Ukrainian and Belarusian assets more risky, which has to do with a lot of other factors, such as general financial position of their governments, such as reserves, maybe some geopolitical risks that are inherent in those countries that they see Armenia much more stable in that respect. So there are a lot of different factors.
Is that because of our banking system? Does the health of the banking system contribute?
Yeah, For sure, the health of the banking system plays a role here. General, the external position of the country, foreign reserves, general political stability, and just overall economic position and just vulnerability to external shocks.
Okay, and just a final question, Gary. What does the Armenian government need to do to ensure that Moody's stops downgrading? I mean, what is it that we need to do to ensure that we do have financial stability, that we do have increase in industrial output, that our companies can begin to grow and, taking advantage of Armenia entering international financial markets, our larger companies allow them to enter those markets?
Well, I think we shouldn't really pay too much attention on a Moody's downgrade, as it is really a symptom of a bigger issue, which is basically the institutional strength of Armenia and openness to global commerce and trade. So Armenian government, as well as the private sector, should really work towards more globalizing their activities. And I think one of the key things is the development of capital markets in Armenia, which right now are not as developed. So the banking sector really bears much of the burden of investments in this economy. Unfortunately, there's a lot of potential for in Armenia for economic growth, which is not tapped, particularly because of that obstacle, because we don't have the capital infrastructure and institutional base to direct savings towards investments and economic growth. So it all sort of connected together. I think the pension reform that is supposed to go into effect in 2014, I hope that it will somehow stimulate the capital markets here and institutional base in this country to provide those investments, and eventually I hope that Armenia's economy will integrate with global markets and be able to tap into global capital, which is much more liquid and efficient.
Well, Gary, I have a lot more questions to ask, but unfortunately our time has run out. I think it would be very beneficial for our viewers if we were able to invite you back again to talk about the pension reform, because it's interesting to me why we would use pension to secure capital when pensions are very, very vulnerable and a very important aspect of social cohesion and social solidarity in Armenia. And also, we could talk about foreign direct investment, how to make Armenia more attractive to foreign investors. But I would like to thank you for coming in today and trying to, enlighten us about the Eurobonds that Armenian government has just issued. Just to remind our viewers, our guest was Gary Muradyan. He's an investment advisor with Capital Investments. Thank you for watching CivilNet.